Mayor, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of Congress, my name is Zarifi. I'm Human Rights Watch's Washington advocate. We were asked specifically to speak about the situation in the Ogaden region of Ethiopia and conditions in Somalia. There have been some questions raised today about what exactly is going on in the Ogaden. I am here to confirm for you, from my colleagues who are on the ground and with whom I've spoken as recently as this morning, that the Horn is on fire, quite literally, and it threatens to really explode. We are at a critical moment for the Horn of Africa, and we believe that there is a human rights and a humanitarian crisis looming in the area. Hundreds of thousands are at risk, and this has all the hallmarks of what the situation that we saw in Darfur in 2003 and 2004, which is a very severe counterinsurgency program with ethnic overtones, coupled with severe restrictions on humanitarian access. And we hope that that situation will not be replicated again. Mr. Chairman, we at Human Rights Watch focus on the rights of the people around the planet, but I'm sure of some interest to you is that we believe that what is going on in the region now seriously affects the United States' interests, and especially because the United States is viewed as the key supporter for the government of Ethiopia, and is therefore viewed with some resentment and increasing resentment. We are very much aware of Ethiopia's genuine security concerns. We are very sensitive to the United States security concerns, but it's my experience as someone who's dealt with counterinsurgencies around the world, the experience of my colleagues, that what the United States and the government of Ethiopia are doing now in the Ogaden and in Somalia is in fact counterproductive and, of course, very abusive of human rights. We have been closely monitoring the events in Somalia and Ethiopia. We recently published the first on-the-ground investigation of what is happening in Somalia and Mogadishu. This is a report, Shell Shocked, that came out in August, which describes an intolerable situation in Mogadishu. Hundreds have been killed. Up to 400,000 people have been displaced as a result of the fighting over there. Our research on the Ogaden area of Somali region, again, some of it as recent as this week and ongoing, has uncovered a civilian population that is under siege and nearly driven to starvation by the parties to the conflict. I want to be clear that there are no clean hands among the hostile parties in this area. Human Rights Watch has documented serious abuses of civilians in the Ogaden, including summary executions by the ONLF. We have published an in-depth investigation of the situation in Mogadishu, including indiscriminate attacks and killings of civilians by the ICU, but unfortunately also by the transitional federal government and mostly by Ethiopian forces. And of course, we are enormously concerned by the Eritrean government's extreme and systematic repression of its citizens. But today we're here to speak about the conduct of the Ethiopian military, not just because they have systematically committed atrocities and violated the basic laws of war, but because Ethiopia is a key ally and partner of the United States in the Horn of Africa and viewed as such, and therefore people in the region will hold the United States to some extent responsible and accountable for what is happening there. We do recognize that Ethiopia has legitimate and serious domestic and regional security concerns. And we do recognize, of course, that all the warring parties share responsibility for the atrocities that are happening. Nevertheless, it is absolutely clear that nothing justifies the severe violations that we are witnessing today in the Ogaden or the conduct of the Ethiopian forces and their allies in Mogadishu. We would like to see, as a first step from the United States government, the public acknowledgement of the depth of the suffering. We saw some of that this morning. But then immediately we would like to see concrete steps to alleviate that misery. The United States policy towards Ethiopia right now seems to be all carrots and no stick. We'd like to see a little bit more stick. This would comply with the United States obligations under international law. It would also be the right thing to do, and I'm sure of some interest to you, it would probably serve the national interests of the United States much better than the administration's current policy. If any of us have learned anything from General Petraeus' recently published document on how to fight a counterinsurgency, we know that you can't win one from the barrel of a gun alone. And what is happening in the Ogaden and what is happening in Somalia, in fact, we believe is counterproductive completely. Let me jump to our findings on what's going on in the Somali region of Ethiopia, if I may. We put out our report on July about the atrocities that we were finding there and a dire and deteriorating situation in the area. The Ethiopian government predictably dismissed our findings, and unfortunately, the U.S. government also dismissed our findings of abuse as unsubstantiated, serious injuries and infections that they later died. We also understand that Ethiopian troops are destroying villages and property, confiscating livestock, and forcing civilians to relocate to urban centers in an apparent attempt to separate the civilian population from the ONLF. And if villagers refuse to leave, they are threatened with severe punishment. Ethiopian troops have confiscated or destroyed livestock, and they have therefore really jeopardized the basis of the economy in the region, which is primarily of nomadic herders. A partial blockade has been imposed on the region, and this has caused serious food shortages. This is something that the UN has also alluded to, and again, I'm here to unfortunately confirm the truth of what has been happening. The main purpose of these restrictions seem to be an attempt to prevent foodstuffs from reaching the ONLF. But the restrictions are so severe that we do believe that they may also be simply trying to force the people of the region to leave their homes, again reminiscent of the situation in Darfur. If we are to avert this looming humanitarian crisis, the U.S. should use all means at its disposal to press the Ethiopian government to immediately end its abuses, especially and including the commercial blockade of the Ogaden, and to allow independent humanitarian relief to reach vulnerable civilians. That's an immediate matter, of course, because we think that the humanitarian situation is untenable for more than a few months. Let me briefly also talk about the situation in Somalia. As I mentioned, we've just recently put out a report based on our research on the ground. Since January of 2007, we're especially concerned to see that the coalition of insurgent groups, including the Al-Shabaab militia, have been waging almost daily attacks on Ethiopian and TFG forces. These have included suicide attacks and targeting of TFG civilians. A lot of these we would like to see the U.S. to immediately and vociferously urge the Ethiopian government to facilitate full unimpeded access of international humanitarian organizations to the civilians in need of assistance in the Somali region. This is a matter of utmost priority. We should also, we would like to see the U.S. government push the Ethiopian government for not just independent investigations, and we were very happy to hear the statements this morning suggesting there is support for that, but also for follow-through on those investigations and proper accountability. There is no point to having an investigation if nothing comes of it. In terms of more internal U.S. issues, we would like to see that the provisions of the Leahy Law are fully adhered to by verifying that no U.S. military assistance to Ethiopia is benefiting military units that violate human rights with impunity, and there are many of those. Of course, we should start with the units that are operating in the Ogaden and in Somalia. Finally, Mr. Chairman, members of Congress, let me ask for assistance. The U.S. should take the lead in asking the United Nations Security Council, but also the U.S. State Department to create a permanent mechanism for gathering information and ensuring accountability for sexual violence. The use of rape and other types of sexual violence as a weapon of war is a grotesque violation of the very basic notion of human rights. We have seen this, unfortunately, everywhere, and recently we are seeing this now in the Horn of Africa. The Security Council right now gathers information about children in armed conflict. We think this is a very important issue for the U.S. Congress and the U.S. administration to pick up, not just in the Horn of Africa, but throughout the world. I thank you for your time. I will be happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Yes.